Mayor of the great city of Ansonia. Welcome to Ansonia. Welcome to Coastal Carriers for entertaining us today. I want to welcome State Senator Stephen Harding, who is the Senate Minority Leader for our state legislative body. It's an honor to have you here today and introduce important legislation that will help Ansonia and the state of Connecticut. As you know, we are struggling here in Connecticut. I wonder why. With an extremely high cost of living due to major parts and the cost of energy, the unfunded mandates on the state level, and the lack of needed special education funding from the legislature. Fiscal guardrails would be a tremendous step in the right direction. At this time, I would like to introduce Senator Harding to explain the legislation and introduce further details. Thank you, and God bless you all.
So I just want to first off thank Mayor Cassetti for welcoming us to the great city of Ansonia. I want to thank John Blair and John Persnicki for inviting us to your location here. I mean, this is the heart of Connecticut. It's businesses like this that keep the engine of our economy running. It's businesses like this that keep people employed, food on their family's table, and helping our economy thrive here in Connecticut. It is fitting today that it's April Fool's Day, and the reason for that is because the Democrats have tried to fool the people of the state of Connecticut into believing that they actually care about fiscal stability, they actually care about the fiscal guardrails that have protected our budgets, have kept us fiscally responsible, and most importantly, have kept taxes in check. The only reason we haven't seen increasing tax increases is because the fiscal guardrails have kept us economically stable and fiscally stable here in the state. And so do not let the Democrats in Hartford fool anybody here in the state and have you believe them in saying that they care about anything about fiscal stability. They are going to rip through these guardrails, if not for a fight from the Connecticut Republican Party, my fellow Senate Republican colleagues, as well as people and voices and businesses throughout this state that are going to ring loud and clear as we begin this affordability tour. We have a cost of living crisis here in Connecticut. We've had a cost of living crisis here for years, and that is because of the policies passed by the Democratic majority. And not only do they not care about the cost of living crisis and helping address it like we as Senate Republicans have tried to address it, they've doubled down on these type of policies. You see them talking about ripping up these fiscal guardrails, which will inevitably lead to record tax increases. You've heard about Amazon deliveries and charging you 28 cents a delivery. You think things are unaffordable now, you're going to tack on another tax to when you get something delivered to your home. You hear about the fact that we have the second or third highest electric rates in the country, with Senator Fazio here behind us, who has led the effort to help reduce those bills and take the public benefit charge off of your bill where it shouldn't be and into the confines of the state budget, helping to immediately decrease the skyrocketing electric bills in our state. We have the second highest reliance on property taxes in the country. We have some of the highest income taxes in the country. Enough is enough. It needs to end. And that is why we're going to businesses like these here at Coastal Carriers. We're here in Ansonia today and across our great state, speaking with small business owners, speaking with residents who have struggled through the Democratic policies that have led us to where we are. We as Senate Republicans have a plan to help reduce your income taxes, to help reduce your property taxes, to help reduce your electric bills. And if you elect more Republicans and work along with us, we will get those policies passed. So today is a kickoff to something that's very important, speaking with the small business owners, as I mentioned, and the residents across our great state, and talking about the affordability that will help make our state even more incredible than it already is. There's no reason, with all the things and resources and people we have here in this state, we cannot be great and economically great. It is the terrible fiscal policies of the Democratic Party that really has stagnated our economic growth and made it more and more difficult for the hardworking people to grow their families here in this great state. So with that said, I'm going to kick it off, I believe, to Senator Fazio, who's going to go into more detail on the plan. I also want to thank Senator Ciccarella for his incredible work and also being a cornerstone of our caucus, driving affordability, and for joining us here today. So Senator Fazio.
Thank you to the great city of Ansonia and Coastal Carriers, one of our great small businesses here in the state, for welcoming us. We're here today because every single one of us in the Senate has been hearing from our constituents for years now, crying for help that the cost of living is too high in this state, that their tax burden is too high, that economic opportunity is meager, and that they need relief. We are here because we've been listening and because it is our goal to provide leadership and relief to middle class and working class families all across the state of Connecticut. Just the other week, I got a letter from a elderly woman in Connecticut who's saying that she has lived here all her life. She's retired and on a fixed income. And while she only writes for herself, she believes that she is speaking for thousands. We silently struggle to navigate the system that governs our basic needs: electricity, heat, lights. We pay our bills on time. We work with what we do have. We know that we do not have enough money to pay the extreme increases in our electric bills, and that there will soon be a point where we will lose our house because we don't have enough money to pay our Eversource bill, our property taxes, and all the other expenses involved in keeping our home. Please help us. Well, today we're saying we are here to help. We are here to lead. We are here to offer solutions. We could cry every day about the fact that for 15 years there's been unitary, one-party control of this state, and that we live under the third highest property tax burden, the second highest income tax burden, and the second highest electricity costs in the country. We could just spend our time complaining. Instead, we are offering solutions, and that's what this announcement here today is about. We are kicking off an affordability tour across the state of Connecticut, where we are announcing and explaining our specific plans to provide relief to residents across the state. It'll be starting in the 36th district, which I represent, down in New Canaan on April 22nd, and we will be touring every single corner of this state to visit with residents and explain to them our multi-point specific plans to lower taxes for middle-class families, to reduce electricity bills for everybody, and to reduce healthcare costs. Specifically, we have been supporting a electricity plan that would cut energy bills by over $500 for the average family in our state. It's a 6-point plan which starts with cutting the public benefits charge on your electric bill. That's a hidden tax that funds over 50 different discretionary government programs passed by the state legislature that do not necessarily deliver electricity to your home to keep the lights on, to keep the heat and the AC on. We also call for capping subsidies to for-profit private electricity producers in the state, in New England, for ensuring that there is an all-of-the-above competitive clean energy strategy rather than the government picking winners and losers, and that there's an independent regulator to protect us from any abuses by the utility companies. PURA should be separate from DEEP, and several other reforms. Our tax plan calls for a $1,000 income tax cut for the average middle-class family in the state of Connecticut. That would be financed by simplifying the tax code, rolling back many of the special interest deductions and credits that exist in our tax code in this state. We call for capping property taxes at increases of no more than 2% or the rate of inflation. That should be paired with eliminating hundreds of unfunded mandates that the state government imposes on our towns and cities that make it so expensive to run a town or a city like Ansonia, like Stamford, like Greenwich, like any other number of our municipalities, and have caused Connecticut's property tax burden to rise to the third highest in the nation, according to the most recent study. And finally, we would preserve the fiscal guardrails to fund the relief we provide to middle-class families. It is a shame that across the board, Democrats have now voted this year to lift the fiscal guardrails, the budgetary protections that have stopped any tax increases in the last 4 years. That will mean not if, but when Democrats raise your taxes in the years to come. And finally, we propose any other number of regulatory reforms cutting red tape to make it easier for small businesses to exist here, easier to access and afford your healthcare bills, easier to provide economic opportunity for all. So in the coming couple of months, we will be taking these plans on the road to say that to this resident, to the senior who wrote to me, and every other resident across the state, that we are not just here to cast stones as Senate Republicans. We are here to provide help, to provide leadership, and to provide hope for the future for the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
For having us here today, John Pernicki for having us here today, and all the senators, Senator Harding and the Senate Republican Caucus. My name is John Blair. I'm president of the Motor Transport Association of Connecticut. I got about 500 dedicated members, mostly small and medium-sized businesses. So cost of doing business to them is the #1 issue. I've been in this job about 4 years. I get calls daily about companies merging, having to move out of the state because of costs. And these are real things. We say these things every year. This seems to come up. It's true. This is happening. And for me, my job is to protect my members from those types of increase in costs that are, caused by government action. Today, my job is to introduce John Pernicki, who's a board member, president of Coastal Carriers. He runs a great business here. He's going to be able to share with you in a little more detail the effects, the Connecticut government have imposed on him over the years, and how difficult it is to do business here in the state of Connecticut generally. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here today, John. Come on up.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Pernicki again. I'm president of Coastal Carriers. Thank you all for being here. I mean, this is tremendous. Senators and the mayor. So when we meet with customers, when myself or my staff meet with customers, our philosophy is we only succeed when our customers succeed. And I've been saying that for the 20 years that we've been in business. And I can't succeed without a tremendous staff that works here, that drives these trucks, that works in our offices. We employ about 60 people. I think I speak for all businesses when I say that we need our state leaders to do the same. We don't feel heard at times. Today is incredibly encouraging. We've had meetings about this at our association meetings, that it would be great to have an opportunity to sit down with leaders at our state legislature and discuss things with them and let them know how we're struggling. And it seems to be difficult in the past few years to do that. And this is certainly an encouraging sign for us. Often decisions we feel like are anti-business or at a very minimum defy logic. And I'm going to talk about a couple things. I mean, the escalating cost of electricity and utilities we're all aware of. I think that beyond that, we have a highway user fee here in Connecticut that was instituted in the past couple of years. It's not in any way monitored. We're a local business. We pay it. It gets passed on to our customers. I'm sure through, when we deliver gasoline to gas stations and we deliver oil to our oil customers, that gets passed down. It's a tax. And our concern is that it's not being fairly applied through the entire transportation industry, that it's just very much targeted to us as a local business here in Connecticut. So we need people, our legislators, to look at this and say, well, number one, where's the money going and who's paying it? Secondly, logistically, we're buying these trucks now that are probably 25% more expensive than they even were 4 or 5 years ago, for emissions reasons, to clean up, which has been a Democratic concern, to clean up the environment, to go electric. And it's causing us, with these new vehicles, to have vehicles that weigh more. We've offered solutions many times. Give us a little bit more weight. You made the changes, and now we need relief. And inevitably what happens is there's no willingness to discuss it. There's no willingness to sit down and understand the impact to us. And at the end of the day, it actually causes us to put more trucks out on the road because we have to make more deliveries to deliver the same amount of product. What's really concerning is electric vehicles are going to weigh twice as much as these trucks. And that's going to cause us to move, or with the 80,000 pound weight limits in the state of Connecticut, it's going to cause that payload to go in half. So essentially, you're going to double the amount of trucks you have on the road, where you have very difficult logistics anyway in the state of Connecticut, and you're going to double the amount of movements that we all have to make to do the same amount of work. A thing that has come up very recently that we also would like everybody to keep in the back of their mind is we're starting to run into problems with frivolous lawsuits, and that's across the transportation industry. We need it to be looked at federal and state level. It's incredibly cumbersome. We almost have to have attorneys on staff at this point to manage it. It's really something that has to be really looked at by the state legislature. These are just a few things. We need to continue to have dialogue like this. I mean, this is tremendous today. We're willing to talk to Democratic leaders, Republican leaders. We hear all the time that Connecticut is not open for business. We've all heard that phrase. In our opinion, and in other business leaders I talk to, that can't be. That has got to change here. We need our state to become attractive again to the larger business community. And I know I speak to everybody or on behalf of everybody when I say we're willing to help that. We're willing to sit down and say, here's how we're affected. How can we bring in new companies? What's the good and bad of the state of Connecticut? You know, my staff, my employees want to be here. We like Connecticut, but it's getting increasingly difficult, and they're looking beyond Connecticut's borders to go live in places that are more business friendly and better quality of life. I appreciate everybody being here. Again, this is very exciting for me to have people here and listening to us. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
So once again, I want to thank John, who again is a business owner here in this state, and I think he hit on something that we just we didn't really delve into too much in the introduction, but the regulatory environment here in our state, which oftentimes is even more burdensome than sometimes the taxes and fees that the majority has thrown on top of all the things that small businesses in the state have to tackle. And so on top of all the things we're going to provide in terms of our plan, in terms of reducing income taxes, reducing electric bills, opposing tax increases such as the mileage tax and other burdensome and cumbersome taxes and fees to the people and the small businesses in the state. But in addition to all that is simply cutting the red tape. It would do so much for so many small businesses in the state to hire more employees, to pay their employees more, to do even more with their businesses if the regulatory red tape and the bureaucracy in Hartford was cut, which is something we always continuously advocate for and will. So I want to thank everybody involved in this today. This is step one and start one of a very exciting tour to speak directly with the residents and businesses throughout the state and find ways that we can provide them affordability and address this cost of living crisis that the people of this state are struggling with, and the Democratic majority seem to want to do nothing about. And to speak to that again, predicting what Democrats in Hartford, particularly Senate Democrats, are going to say about this. They will lie about this plan. We have a plan in place to offer $1,000 on average to families throughout the state in income tax relief, property tax relief. They'll lie about aspects of our plan and then point to Washington, D.C. Like John had mentioned, let's have a discussion. You want to talk about aspects of our plan that you agree with? Let's sit down and talk. We want to provide affordability to address the cost of living crisis. We're not even looking to fight about this issue, but I know what they're going to say, which means they truly don't care about affordability and the cost of living crisis we have in this state, which is really a shame. So with that said, I'm going to open it up to any questions that anyone may have here.
Steve, on the income tax that we've talked about, the financing of that plan, one of the points the Democrats bring up is they say one of those sales tax exemptions is on home heating oil.
Right, and that's another lie. So what they're talking about in our plan is where we're going to review over a span of time different credits. We're obviously never in a million years going to support removing credits that are helping reduce home heating oil. And they know that. They know that. So it's another way simply to gaslight and pretend they don't want to talk about the issue. They don't want to talk about the fact they've been in charge since Ryan and I were in high school in this building and have done nothing but raise taxes and fees and regulations upon small businesses and residents alike. And we, in the Republican Party, have been the only ones calling from the rooftops for the people of this state and the small businesses saying enough is enough, do something about this. So they have to lie about our plans. It's a complete lie. So I'm happy you asked that question, because that's where I was going with their lie about our plan.
Are there tax hikes on the table in this legislative session?
Absolutely, that we're going to oppose every single aspect of it, but they're going to have to find a way to come up with the revenue. And Ryan, in his role as ranking member of the Finance Committee, could probably speak more to this. But they're having a more and more difficult time. They're overspending the budget, frankly, and not for nothing. I want to mention something in terms of the fiscal irresponsibility of the Democratic Party, who control every lever of our state government currently. In my time in the building, we ran deficits when I got elected as a state rep back in 2015. We ran deficits because the revenues coming in were lower than projected, right? This is the first time in my career in the legislature where we're running deficits because we're spending too much money. They can't even control spending currently in the fiscal year. And the only way you're going to afford to pay for these spending increases is through increasing revenue, which is increasing taxes. So I think that they're evidently discussing the mileage tax, which would cripple small businesses just like here. They're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, increasing fees on deliveries, which would cripple a lot of middle-class families that are struggling to find relief here. And I think they're going to look at income taxes as well. And they're also going to talk about ripping apart those guardrails, which Senator Fazio mentioned is a code word for saying we're going to increase your taxes. Because the only reason we have not seen income tax increases is because of the guardrails. And that's why you're going to see us in the Republican caucus continuing to fight for those guardrails.
Steve, can I add
Yeah.
one thing? Last income tax cut, which would equate to a little over $1 billion of revenue needed. That revenue can be found easily without eliminating any of the tax exemptions that you had mentioned that our Senate Democratic colleagues tried to use to fearmonger, because there are $9 to $10 billion of special tax credits and carve-outs and deductions. You only need to find about $1 billion of them to finance a $1,000 middle-class tax cut. The rest can be done through limiting spending, not even cutting spending, just limiting the growth of spending. That's how easy it would be to provide meaningful tax relief to middle-class families in this state. You don't even need to do anything drastic. It's just pure waste and decadence that this state continues to have the second highest tax burden in the country. It doesn't need to be this way. There would be no basic needs that would need to be cut in order to provide the efficiencies to deliver a middle-class tax cut. And to your point about tax increases being on the table, the governor's budget was a tax increase budget that he presented just a month ago. It had roughly $100 million of tax increases, business tax increases and hospital tax increases. They dwarf any of the very minor cuts to certain fees in the budget. And if the governor's budget calls for $100 million of tax increases, you know the legislature's budget is going to be even more expensive in terms of taxes and spending. So even in a time when we aren't anticipating deficits according to the Office of Fiscal Analysis, or we're roughly in balance, the Democrats in charge of the state still want to raise your taxes, and they want to break the budget guardrails to increase spending through budget gimmicks, which will mean the tax increases 2 years from now will be even worse.
They also say that they might take extraordinary fiscal measures anticipating cuts from Washington in the fall. Do you guys blanketly reject any type of, whether it's with the volatility transfer, any type of movements or maneuvers between the legislature to say, we need to put $1 billion aside?
They've been planning on doing this long before any federal cuts were speculated, right? Let's be honest. So that they're using that as a convenient excuse. And for the media to allow them to use that as a convenient excuse, I mean, all of you know that they've been calling for this long before any federal cuts. In fact, to Senator Fazio's point, the governor's own budget that he proposed broke the fiscal guardrails long before they were discussing federal cuts. So don't let them use that as an excuse, because that's all it is.
We're going to be with them this afternoon. They're going to sue the federal administration again over the two particular things that have hit Connecticut last week: education and public health. Talk about your reaction to.
Well, I mean, I obviously it's incumbent upon the state of Connecticut to advocate for the state of Connecticut, but as is typical with the Democratic Party in our state, they don't want to address what is in the here and the now because they've controlled every lever of government for decades now. They've led to the second highest tax burden in the country. They've led to the third highest electric rates. We have a plan to do something right here in the state of Connecticut about something we can directly control, and they want nothing to do with it. Instead, they want to talk about Washington, D.C. So I'm not surprised that that's what their press conference is about today. Our press conference, once again, as the Senate Republican Caucus, is about what we can control right here in Connecticut, which is going to continuously be our focus.
Senator Harding, Senator Fazio, both of you had mentioned easing costs for towns and cities through getting rid of unfunded mandates for the state. Could you provide some examples of these unfunded mandates that you would like to see?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we're talking about is the purchase and labor agreements that add hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to some of these school construction projects. We're talking about prevailing wage and some modifications we can make to that. I mean, Mayor Cassetti, well, he was here, he took off. So this would have been a perfect time for him to step up to the mic and maybe talk about some of the burdensome unfunded mandates. But, I think you to look at purchase and labor agreements, you look at prevailing wage and the cost that it costs to many towns and how much that raises your municipal property taxes. Those are two areas right there that we can, yeah.
You had a letter yesterday calling on the appointment of a Republican U.S. attorney. Any names that you would suggest the president consider?
I think we would like somebody that's going to address some of the things that have gone on that's extremely questionable to openly fraudulent in our state government that the Democratic Party seemingly doesn't want to address. And so I think there's a number of candidates that I've heard about that I think would do a good job in addressing that. I mean, I happen to know David Sullivan very well. He ran for Congress in 2020. He's just outside of my district. He lives in the other part of New Fairfield. But he's somebody I think that would do an incredible job in that role.
And just on a higher level, we saw last week you guys had a pretty aggressive press conference, a pretty notable press conference. This tour is being kicked off now talking about affordability. Is this part of a more concerted effort to be more outspoken, more aggressive as Republicans?
Well, I think this is just simply reflecting the voice of our constituents. I think they come to us every day and they say, what can you do to stop the madness in Hartford? And the only way we can do anything about it is to speak about it. And we're not going to sit back and allow the majority in Hartford to do what they've done in the past. And I think it's led us to where we are today, as I mentioned before, with the second highest tax increase, second highest burden on taxes, whether it comes down to income tax or property tax, and the third highest electric rates. And so we're going to be there every step of the way, calling them out for it and proposing alternatives that will help actually reduce costs. So you want to say it's a different style, that's fine, but it's really just reflective of our constituency and advocating for them.